participate in actually learning how to cultivate, grow, harvest. I want to actually have this on my own. Are we incentivizing it for ownership? Or we not, and people would just feel like they're being used? Does that make sense?
It does
So
make. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Clarence.
yeah, so I want to ask this question. Wait,
Okay.
wait, can y'all hear me?
I can hear you
Yeah.
now.
No, I just told somebody I'm starting a Twitter space at 7 o'clock. So why do they call me now at 7:50? Like what? I just told you I'm doing something. So anyway, so I got one question for you, then another question, and then we're going to open it up to questions from everybody. So folks, get your questions together. If you don't want to ask it directly, you can put it down in the chat, B Walker, or I will ask it for you. But go ahead and start lining up in the speakers box if you like a question to ask a question. But I got to know who you are. I don't know who this new dude is. So, but as we talk about immigration, what do you think the impact of illegal immigration is on Black Americans?
Ooh, I think it has a large impact on Black Americans in a bad way. And that's even with a lot of immigrants that come here from Africa and that come here from the Middle East. Because a lot of times, people will say, well, they look like you, but they don't talk like you. They don't move like you because they're not Americans. And it's extremely unfortunate that Black Americans, as much as we've tried to attain and move up the ladder, there will be another ethnicity that comes down to kind of ticker us down to the bottom of the chain. So even though we are a nation of immigrants, it still seems to be unequal in the opportunities that Black Americans get as immigration rises. Because what I've seen in our community is yes, there are some business owners, but we're not all taught ownership, which is unfortunate because there should be far more many Black owners in Black neighborhoods, but there aren't. And we need to go back to why is that? Why don't we have, a 80% ownership in a Black neighborhood with Black owners as opposed to an 80% ownership of other ethnicities in that neighborhood? So immigration has not assisted Black Americans at all.
Okay, and I know once we open it up, some people are going to ask some more questions about that and other
Mhm.
things. So I'll leave it for that time. My last
Okay.
question, and then we'll get to the other questions from the audience, and then we can mix some other ones in there too. On your website, one of the policies that you have highlighted is voting rights.
Mhm.
Now, I'm a conservative, and I think the voting rights conversation is a scare tactic. I think it's absolute BS, right? I believe that nobody's trying to mess with your voting rights as it relates to Black people. Black people voter turnout increases every cycle, right? From my vantage point, there's no suppression, right? But
Mhm.
we don't care what I think; it's about what you think. So you're talking about voting rights. What's your policy on voting rights as President of the United States?
Yes, well, I just want to make sure that people are not disenfranchised. And what I mean by that is, for example, here in the state of Georgia, there was a bill passed as far as voting rights, SB 201. And what it did was for those that are possibly elderly and disabled, if they say have a caretaker and they have to vote by absentee, the way the law is written, it can only be a close relative, which would be like maybe a brother, sister, aunt, be a stepfather, stepmother, Again, it could be a care facility administrator or caretaker, but it can't be a cousin. When I saw that, I called and I was like, well, why did they exclude cousin? Because everybody's got a cousin, but they excluded that. And by excluding that, that probably disenfranchised maybe thousands of people. We don't know. Because what if that's the only relative you have? What if everybody else has died off? So I'm looking at laws that are in states that may disenfranchise people on that level. Because each state, they do have their own voter laws. So the laws here in Georgia are different from California or Mississippi or, just we can go on and on. We have 50 states. But I want to make sure that voters are not disenfranchised very similarly to the bill that I noticed here in Georgia. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about voter rights. I'm talking about the minutiae that happen. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think you're going to have a difficult time given that, the state's rights
Mhm.
position, and that, like as you mentioned,
Right,
every state has different laws,
right.
and the federal government only has so much purview
Mhm.
on that. Particularly, it's the Voting Rights Act, in which certain parts of it have been removed. So, I think you will have a tough time getting into minutia
Okay,
like that.
okay.
But I hear you. I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear you. So, B, let's open it up. Let's open it up one by one. I ain't gonna put the whole stage on here. I'm gonna bring everybody up one at a time. Ask your question, right? I'm gonna be honest with you. You got 1 minute to ask your question. I don't want to hear no big, huge rant. We want to hear from the candidate, not so much you. So just ask your question of the candidate respectfully, and then allow the candidate to respond to you. All right. So, B, who you want to bring up one by one?
We'll start with Alfred.
Hello, can
What's
everybody
up,
hear me?
Alfred?
Hey,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
yeah, I'll be super quick. So, this is kind of a two-part question. What is your opinion on the current conflict in Ukraine? Do you think that we should be involved? How much should we be involved with the current administration? Do you agree with the actions that they are taking, or do you disagree? And then, broader point, geopolitically, what do you think is the United States' role in the world? Certainly, you have some people who say they want us to be just as involved with NATO as we've always been, maintain military bases and presence around the world. And you have many people who want us to be a bit more isolationist and bring bring our troops home and tear down those bases. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Hello, Alfred. Thank you so much for your question. So, as far as Ukraine goes, I do not think that we should be there. If we are there in any type of capacity, it should be to assist in negotiations. And there have been, unfortunately, lives lost, but there have been billions of dollars spent. And we really don't have an account of where and how it was spent. And looking at the amount of money that was spent, we still have people here in our own country living on the streets or who can't get housing and living in their cars. So we really have to look at what we're really doing. As far as our role in the world, we are not the savior of the planet. We cannot be everybody's hero. I do understand why, in certain areas of conflict, we may have a presence, but at the same time, people have their own governing forces within their own country. I think it's okay to speak at the United Nations or speak um, at the World Economic Forum, but it's a different thing, or even NATO, but it's a different thing to be a part of those organizations and fund them. We have a large budget when it comes to just those three organizations, which nobody in this country voted for to be a part of in the first place. So we have to be very careful about how we ally. our resources with the rest of the world so we're not overextending ourselves. Because what I've seen a lot of poverty here in our own country while we're trying to save poverty somewhere else. Where why can't we just go, okay, country, whatever country that is, your government, that's their job to make sure that you're okay. It's not our job to make sure that you're okay. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Women's prison pen pal. All right, she's connecting. All right, whenever you're ready.
Oh, that was for me.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
okay. It went out. Thank you, Clarence, for holding this space, boy. You getting better and better, huh? Okay.
Bless you, brother.
Yeah. So I just have really one question to you, sister. So because of the way the political system is set up, we mainly basically have two parties, really the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And I do understand you said that you're pretty much in the middle. My question is, do you have intentions on participating in the presidential debate? And if you do, how are you going to navigate being in the middle and not necessarily aligned with either party?
Thank you so much for your question. So, as an independent, it is extremely difficult to get to those debates. So, thank you for putting that positivity out there because that gives me a goal to attain. So, where I would be more in the middle is, let's just say, for example, we've got to the far, far left, we have individuals that are unfortunately okay with children being castrated. And then at the far, far right, we have, um, how should I say this? I don't want to say it in a mean way, but we have far, far right, we have possible candidates that want to end affirmative action. So there are extremes that are out there. And what I'm saying is there has to be a way to actually have a civil conversation and a real conversation because obviously we don't want children mutilated, right? But we also don't want those individuals to feel like they're not being heard where they are. So we have to have those conversations to say, why don't you love who you are, first of all? And why do you want to make a permanent decision that's irreversible? Do you understand that? And if you don't, then you shouldn't even be in the position to make that decision. On the other side, with the far right, you've got someone who's like, we need to end affirmative action. Okay, I get it. Affirmative action was put in place to basically legislate people's feelings because discrimination, that's a feeling, and your feelings can change over time. But it was put in place to be some measure of protection so that Black Americans in this country could at least work a job and so women could work a job. They're both two extremes, and there is a better answer to it. So, for affirmative action, it's like, okay, well, let's look at the fact that maybe we just need an anti Black hate crime bill. Let's start there. Let's actually put protections into place for people who were formerly slaves or descendants of slaves who are now living here as American citizens. Let's give them some protections so that you just can't burn down their stores or their lives. And then there's no repercussions behind that. So that's why I say I fall somewhere in the middle because I just want logic. I don't want politics. So I hope that answers your question. Hello? I can't hear you if you're there or not there. I see your little things moving, but you might be in the matrix because I don't hear you.
Oh, no, no, it is. No,
Okay.
No, it answered my question, and I guess it answered for Eric because that might have been something that was on everybody else's mind also. Thanks for the
Okay.
answer.
You're welcome.
All right, Brolic. All right, Brolic, you're up.
All right, all right. So peace to the room. Um, Speaking on the topic of immigration, um, I it seems to be affecting this class of people very specifically through all sides. Um, do you would you support the 14th Amendment being repealed?
Yes, because it can basically make someone a slave at any time.
14th
And
Amendment,
that's,
not 13th.
oh no, not the 13th. Okay, the 14th. Okay, 14th Amendment. I will have to refresh myself because I've been so focused on the
The
13th.
14th Amendment allows citizenship to people. It pretty much, if you're born on U.S. soil, people are allowed to have full
Mm-hmm.
access and be citizens of America, of the United States. And the reason why I asked that question is because
Mm-hmm.
I deem it very problematic when foreigners can get rights and privileges that were
Mm-hmm.
predicated and built off of ancestors from people who were here. I don't have a problem with legal residency or national, a national of wherever, but I think them being able to have citizenship is very problematic.
Okay. Thank you for your question and thank you for brushing me up on the 14th because I do focus on the 13th one so hard. I'm like, must my zero lens. But earlier I did state that it isn't right for someone to break the law, come over here illegally. So they've already broken the law. And then if they have a child here, they're allowed to stay here and that child gets citizenship. That's where the 14th Amendment definitely needs to have, I don't want to say repealed, but it needs to be restructured. Maybe that is the same as repealing it, but it needs to have a distinction because at the time it was written for slaves. These individuals are not slaves. They did not assist in building the country. They're taking advantage of that particular amendment by having a child here and by way that child, because they said, well, the child's innocent, the child didn't do anything wrong. Yes, but the person that came here and had that child, they knew exactly what they were doing, so they contributed to a delinquency of a minor. So there's another crime that's committed. So there's all these criminal activity being done, and no one's holding it accountable as criminal activity. They just want to say, oh, they're just trying to get a better life, they're just immigrants. It's like, no, they're criminals and they should be treated as such. And each child that is born here, brought over here illegally, it's criminal activity. And that's, we deal with criminals by saying, no, you need to go home. Your child that was born here, they do not have citizenship here because they did the activity illegally. So that would be definitely a repeal. We would have to, because if we're going to claim to be a nation of laws, and not when it's convenient, but at all times, we would have to say, okay, your child that was born here, they're not going to be a citizen if they're born here. And people need to know that. But nobody's doing that because the plan behind it, and this is just my opinion, this is just what I've seen since I've been a little girl. People come here and they break the law and it's okay. But if my family breaks the law because they look like me, they may spend life in prison. And it just needs to change. So I hope that answers your question. Hello, are you still there,
Yeah, I'm still here.
Brolic?
I
Okay.
appreciate you. I'll say one last thing. It was more so a statement, but the Bill of Rights was created to protect our rights and liberties and everything else. Almost every amendment literally goes against the Bill of Rights. So I think we should start there, and
Mhm.
we can unpack a lot of things. And I land. Thank you for speaking with me.
Mhm.
Yep,
All right,
yep.
next
Thank
we'll
you,
bring up
Chief.
River. Next, we'll try to bring up River. He's still connected,
Okay.
so we'll
Before
see
we
if.
get to him, everybody, thank you for your questions. Keep the questions coming. I see a couple questions in the chat. We'll get to those. If you don't want to ask your question directly, just put it in the chat. We'll get to that and ask as well. I don't know what happened to review error. Make sure you tweet this space out. Unmuted conversation with presidential candidate Ashaki Nichols, running for the highest office in America. And she said something before. If you just got in here, she said some things that are kind of monumental. The sister said that she wants to get rid of the IRS. She says we don't need to pay any federal income taxes. All taxes paid to the federal government should come through retail taxes on goods and services. That's what she said. I asked her about the immigration question. She said they need to stay where they at. She says, I want a 10-year moratorium. Close the border for 10 years. And anybody that is illegally in the country within that time frame should get deported. That's what this sister said. That's where she stands on several issues. So her website is, I'm looking at it now, Nichols.President.org. So if you want to look at that and create a question around it, I'm joined by my great co-host B Walker. B Walker, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good, my friend. Pretty good.
Good, good.
Christopher, it's on you.
Thank you, Clarence and B. Walker. Peace to the room, and Miss Nichols. The question I have is, I like everything I was hearing you say so far in the space this evening. When I read your platform on reparations, the only question I have is, I see that you say use the Reserve Reparations Reserve Act, pretty much like a third party to distribute reparations to the descendants of chattel slavery, U.S. chattel slavery. Um, would you consider direct cash payment? And also, when you are president, you would have to have Congress agree to the bill to distribute reparations to the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. Are you willing to overpower or veto them if they do not agree to paying out reparations? Something more like what 45 was trying to do with Congress if they don't agree with what you want.
Hello, Christopher. Thank you so much
Wait,
for
hold,
your
hold on, hold on, hold
question.
on,
Oh,
hold on, hold on, 1 second. Chris, that was like three questions in one, wasn't it? Can we break them up just so she can answer them? Because I heard like five questions in there. What was the first question?
Oh, the first question was, would she consider direct cash payments? And
Okay,
basically, if Congress don't agree with pushing the bill for reparations, would she
okay.
consider
Uh-huh.
overpowering them, vetoing them, and doing what need to be done?
Okay, direct cash payments. Do you agree with that? Two, would you try to work past the veto? And then what was there a third one?
No, sir, that's it.
Okay, all right, cool. Thank you for the clarity. Go ahead, Ms. Nichols.
okay. Again, thank you for your question. So, I was looking at a Reparations Reserved Act similar to the Federal Reserve Act. Then that way it would be enacted in law and they wouldn't be able to touch it. So, to get past Congress, I'm going to go a little bit backwards with your questions. You could put in place an executive order very similar to what Joe Biden just did with the Build Back Better Act. He used an executive order initially, then, Congress voted on it. So that is a way to get around Congress, not in a long term fashion, but at least to get it started on the books and get the ball rolling and the process moving. I know there is a way to override Congress. I wouldn't want to further disrupt the country. But I think that at this juncture, with as many states are pushing for reparations, and with movements of reparations moving forward, we could definitely come to a resolution on it. So I think we'd be closer to a resolution, but somebody definitely has to take the helm at the federal level and at least in its smallest measurement put forth an executive order to get the ball rolling at the federal level so that there are protections around it. As far as the cash payments, I know that I want to see it be lineage based so people that are of lineage can get their payments directly. I know a lot of times people say, well, where's this money going to come from? There is actually a judgment fund that exists where there's an unlimited amount of money. It does not affect our taxes, it does not affect the overall budget that we have for this country. And they've paid other judgments out of that fund. If you look it up, it's accessible to anyone. You can Google Federal Judgment Fund and you can actually see that there have been payments made for other atrocities that have been committed by the US government, where they are actually paying restitution for different acts that have happened. So, for what I'm trying to do with reparations, it's not just about the money, it's also about the protections. Because what I don't want is I don't want reparations to move forward and then after a term, somebody could come right behind and say, okay, we're going to scratch it, we can't afford it, or make up whatever excuses they want for it. It's like, no, this is here and it's going to be here to stay. It's going to make sure we have an anti Black hate crime bill. We're going to make sure that people are actually going to be able to be safe and prosper and live in this country that have Black skin, that are foundational Black Americans or free men or Black Americans, and have that safety and protection just like every other race does in this country. That answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, next we're going to bring up River. He's connecting. We had a connection issue last time, so we will hopefully be able to get him on the microphone here. Still buffering.
Y'all been asking some great questions. I really appreciate it. Really good, respectful questions. Let's keep it up, and I'll get to those questions in the chat in a moment.
All right, River. I'm going to have to get you some better Wi-Fi.
He always got Wi-Fi problems. The brother out there in Oklahoma,
Oh, well,
they don't have good broadband out there.
it was
You know,
supposed to be fixed next year, allegedly with the infrastructure bill. So
that brother
hopefully that is.
that brother needs to move. Come down to Georgia. Where'd the sister go? There she is. She popped out. She must have moved to Oklahoma too. Um,
Okay, so hold on. She requested.
try to get
Hold, hold, hold on, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to get him back here.
okay.
All right, hold on, brother River. Connecting.
I guess my phone don't want to work.
All
Man,
right, brother. How
you
you
got to
doing?
let that Android go,
No,
brother.
I
Oh
got
man,
an
here we
iPhone.
go.
Go ahead, brother.
Okay,
All right, brother. It's on
can
you.
you hear me? That's the most important part.
Yes,
Okay,
sir. I was clear.
perfect. Um, so I just got one single question, and I see that the reparations, and whatever had already been asked, I'm not going to go back and say something that she's already firm on. My question is, um, as far now, I will ask a question about reparations. My question about reparations is, I heard you were talking about there's an unlimited financial obligation for any traumas that the United States has caused or whatever the United States has caused. And that's fine. The other thing that I heard was, man, I kind of lost train of thought. The most important part that I was going to ask was when we were talking about the finances, where the finances were going to come from, excuse me, is would you be willing to run on the idea of removing foreign aid to Israel and foreign aid to other countries like the Ukraine? We just gave them $1 billion. in kind of putting a halt to their funding in order for us to get our reparations. And that's where I'll land there.
Hello, thank you so much for your question. Um, how should I say it? I I'm in agreement with removing their funding just so we can actually have our money here in the United States because we send billions of dollars just not to Israel or Ukraine, but several countries annually. And I think it's become a way of us, unfortunately, going over there and pillaging in certain aspects, which isn't right either. As the United States, as if it's okay to go over there and commit crimes. But I want it to come from the judgment fund because that is an unlimited source that they couldn't touch. Whereas if you are moving money around, let's say on the balance sheet, they can say, well, we have to stop paying reparations because, we really can't afford it anymore. It's like, no, it's going to come out of that judgment fund because that's where all the other funds come from for the atrocities that have been committed. I want to ensure that you can't touch it. Once this is done, you can't touch it, you can't mess with it. And when people apply for it, they use that code to get their monies because they have done the research. They know that they are owed those funds. Now, I know to second that people will say, well, what about me? What if I can't prove my lineage? Where you're still going to benefit is because I'm also wanting to put back the Freedmen Banks. And I know that Marcel has talked about putting the Freedmen Bureaus in place so that there is still a, how should I say it? It still prospers individuals that don't get direct payments, but they're not going to be, taken advantage of if they want to finance their home, if they want to finance a business. They're not going to be turned away, or they're not going to get slapped with 15% where they should be getting 5% loans, right? If they want to start a business or buy a home or finance a car, we really need to make sure that, like I said, again, it comes back to protections. It's financial, it's housing, it's in all aspects, and even criminal. So, yeah, I want to make sure that we stop spending money in other places where we don't need to spend money. And I mean, I don't want to say it in a mean way, but it's like hush money. Crimes have been committed in other places, and we're just like, oh yeah, I guess we agreed to pay you just a little on the side because we went over there and kind of blew up something and killed some people. So we'll give you this $1 billion over here. Sorry, oops. No, we need to get away from that and start taking care of home first and not everywhere else. Hope that answers your question.
That did. Thank you.
Yep. So I got another question for you, and then B, you can follow me here. Everybody, thank you for being here. Make sure you tweet this space out, an unmuted conversation with presidential candidate Ashaki Nichols from Georgia. You can look at her website, Nichols for President, see her whole platform, everything that she stands for. Her platform is God, family, education, and health. And so one thing I haven't heard you specifically talk about, I thought somebody was going to ask it, but they didn't. So I'll take the pleasure in asking this question. Black Americans are the backbone of America. We are the lifeblood of America. We drive every election, locally, state level, federal level. We have historically been cast aside, pushed to the margins, forgotten about, discriminated against, murdered, tortured, lynched, beaten, discriminated against at the polling places, property stolen, all those different things, right? And so now here we are in 2023, and Democrats continue to take for granted the Black American vote. They continue to dangle carrots in our face leading up to the election. And once we give them our vote, we get nothing burgers in return. And so I don't specifically see anything like this on your website. So I just want to ask you directly, what is your agenda for Black America as President of the United States?
So my agenda is, again, it falls under the Reparations Act that I want to put forward, because a lot of what you're talking about is definitely true. There's no accountability after parties make promises and they don't follow through on them. And like I was saying with my Reparations Act, I want to put in place an anti-Black hate crime bill. Now, that may be something that can stand alone, but I want it within the Reparations Act because, like I said, I want it solidified in law and not lost. It starts there because for, unfortunately, over a century or more, Blacks have been told, hey, go out and make things happen. And they did. Our forefathers, they did. And then their cities were burned down by the very people that told them to go out and be successful. So you can't keep telling people to be successful and you keep burning down the progress. So I want to ensure that Black Americans are protected with an anti-Black hate crime bill, that Black Americans are actually focused upon when it comes to actually starting businesses, not just get them so far as to, okay, you've done all the paperwork. Yeah, now you still have to wait for it to be approved. It's like, no. When Japanese Americans were in internment camps and then they were released to pay restitution, the American government said, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars so you can start a business. These should be things that Black Americans have and be able to start businesses based on restitution. So even with or without a reparations act, that needs to be put in place. Because even after the whole thing with COVID, you know, there were Black American businesses, I'm sure, that were maybe around for 10, 15 years that had no choice to be shut down. But Walmart, they got the money. Amazon got the money. Why didn't these businesses get the money to stay open? I'm grateful that there were a lot of people that got to start businesses and, just kind of revamp their lives because, they didn't really have choices. But at the same time, there was historical businesses that had no choice but to shut down. And it's, how should I say it? I know a lot of people will be like, it's racist to want to put your own people first. But you know what? Everybody else puts their own races first. And then we are basically told you can't do that because we would be deemed racist if we did. It's not right. We can no longer say, yeah, I'm going to sit back. I'm not going to say anything. No, not anymore. I'm proud to be a Black American. I'm proud to be an American. But I'm no longer going to sit around and watch you make promises that you're not going to keep. And so we have to hold the Black Congress, was it the Black Caucus, accountable? The NAACP, they need to be held accountable. Unfortunately, they're getting all the money, but they're not doing anything. I'm 51 years old. I mean, really? And how long have these institutions been around? And they still haven't gotten anything done. But hey, when voting season comes around, it's like, we'll help you. No, you won't. Stop lying. They need to be replaced with people like me and like you and like everybody in this space. They need to be replaced. We need to get the placeholders out of those positions and start getting people in those positions who actually want to get things done. That's how we do it. I hope that answers your question. I know I was a
Yeah.
little
So
bit
so
all over the place.
no, no, no. So yeah. So and I like to kind of bring it back and make sure I heard you clear. So what I heard your Black agenda is a anti-Black hate crime bill
Yes.
and reparations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I'll tell you one thing I would like to see, and then you can follow me. B. One thing I would like to see is included in that reparation. Well, it ain't got to be included in the reparations, but it could be standalone. Because I saw, all right, the NAACP got what was that, $50 million from Wells Fargo,
Mm-hmm.
not too long ago, right?
Yep.
And I don't even know what it was for, right? And then secondly, I just saw TD Jakes just
Mm-hmm.
got, was it 1 billion? What was that number? I don't know
Yeah.
what that
Well,
number was.
yeah, it was billion with a B.
Yeah, for mixed use for a mixed use housing development project, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
man, TD Jakes is about to be, he's rich, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
here we are, Wells Fargo, who have historically discriminated against black people for decades on top of decades,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Have systemically denied applications, participated in the transatlantic slave trade when you look back into it, right?
Right.
And so they continue to pay federal fines for discriminatory practices against black homeowners,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then they just get off. They figure the best way to take care of the debt is go talk to Al Sharpton, NAACP, and pay 50 mil to the NAACP, and then give 1 billion to TD Jakes, this big, this famous black pastor, and all their sins are forgiven, right?
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see a federal program, because what the heart of that means that the crux of black wealth is black home ownership,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you can own a home, then you can get started on generational wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pass that down to your children. It's just as simple as that. That's the crux of it. Everything else builds out from there. And so I
Yeah.
would love to see a federal program where the federal government sets aside, $50 billion toward no down payment, affordable loans for black folks,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you take out the down payment piece and then take care of the closing costs, and put black folks in a home, right? We got the money. We're sending it to Ukraine right now, right? So
Oh
I
yeah.
would love to see a program of that sort, separate from reparations. It is a form of
Mm-hmm.
reparations, but I don't want to get
Right.
tied up into the bigger
Right.
bill,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah, I
I would love to
understand.
see standalone itself to get black folks embracing and enjoying what it means to be a homeowner in America, right? And, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely in agreement with your mindset because there have been other groups of individuals, let's just say, that have gotten maybe not as much, but very similar set asides so that they can build that generational wealth. Now, I know the argument will be, well, you guys have been here and you've been able to attain that. Yes and no. Yeah, they were you know, freed slaves were given land and they did start towns and cities, but then they were turned around and they were burned down and they were murdered and they were slaughtered. And if you don't do your history or research, you would even never know these places even existed. Now, had they left those places alone so that Black Americans could, have that generational wealth so they could continue to build and grow, we wouldn't be having these conversations right now, but we are. So I'm definitely in agreement with a set aside to build up Black home ownership, but it has to be done the right way where it's not being given to organizations that can take 75% of the money and only give out 25% of it and still call it an actual program. I think that's where those conversations get lost because a lot of times we think, oh yeah, they're giving 50 million to the NAACP and we ain't gonna see none of that money. NAACP is gonna see 75 to 80% of that, and it maybe a few million will get actually sent out for the program that they were given that money for. Same thing with TD Jakes with that $1 billion. I am so sorry. I appreciate him. He's a pastor. I don't see it. I don't see that money actually being dealt out to Black Americans the way it's supposed to be, right? Because the conversation's going to happen. Everybody in here knows they're going to be like, well, Black people, they're coming up, but we have some other people over here that we can help with that money too. Stop it. But I'm sorry. It is the same conversation, different day. They use people that we look up to be placeholders to get our attention, to say, hey, look, here's somebody here that looks like you that actually supports you. No, they don't. I love me some TD Jakes, but no, they don't. Sorry. I'm not buying it. I'm not going there. Show me first your track record with doing it the right way. Actually making sure that black wealth is being built, not just for your buddies, but for the person that it's unattainable for, that they actually get to attain it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
Absolutely. Miss T, civil rights. You're up next.
Clarence and B. Walker. Clarence, thank you for hosting this space with presidential candidate Miss Nichols. And hi, Miss Nichols. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Miss T?
Great. Y'all, I had the pleasure of sitting with Miss Nichols at the uh, rally that Tariq had, and got a chance to meet her live and in person. She's a real person and very genuine in her love for our people. But I do have a question for you, Miss Nichols. Is there anything that you need to share with us that may arise during the vetting portion of your candidacy that could be harmful or detrimental to your campaign that has occurred in your life or any of your close family, like spouse, kids, anything at all that may be harmful that we should be aware of?
Hey, Miss T, thank you so much for your question. Actually, I wrote a book a couple of years back, and it's called Stealing Lives. It's actually on Amazon, where I documented some things that happened to me growing up. Unfortunately, I was an abuse survivor, different relatives, and my past isn't checkered, so I haven't been to jail, y'all. I'm good. Um, no one in my immediate circle has done anything of serious criminal activity that I'm aware of. I think the worst thing that has happened in my past was that my younger sister, on Christmas Day 2010, she was unfortunately murdered by her spouse. And so my family, we've had to rally around raising her children that were left behind. So if there was anything bad that happened, that happened. Um, Other than that, I've been a single parent. I've been married. This is my third marriage. I've been on government assistance when I've needed to be, but obviously I've gotten off of government assistance, haven't needed that for a while. I've finished my paralegal degree, my bachelor's degree, along with my master's degree. So I've turned the corner there. But there's not really anything out there that I haven't already written in the book that could come back. So that would be salacious, or that could smear the campaign, so to speak.
Thank you for addressing that. And it sounds like you've been through a lot of things that a lot of Americans can connect with. Many of us have had family members who unfortunately have left this world at the hands of a loved one. Many can connect with being on social services or needing assistance. And I do appreciate you being open and candid. And I look forward to supporting you in this race. I'm not sure if you posted up your campaign information where we can make contributions, But again, Clarence and B. Walker, thank you for the space, and thank you, Miss Nichols.
Thank you, Miss T.
Concerned Black Citizen, you on the mic.
Good evening. Good evening. What a nice surprise. Thank you for this room. And hello, Ms. Nichols. Um,
Hello.
I'm especially delighted that Miss T has met you in person. Wow, what a great start. So, I know I'm late, so I just wanted to just briefly say again, wow, what a nice surprise. And could you if it's not too redundant, just a brief recap of the redemption party. Um, Secondly, America's or Black America's biggest problem in your eyes, and thirdly, your stance on immigration.
Okay.
Let's
I'm
try to
trying
take
to
them
write some
one
of
at a
these
time.
things
Hold on.
down.
Let's try to take them one at a time. Concerned Black Citizen, if
Okay.
you could ask the first question first, and then we'll try to chop that one up.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Concern, for joining the space. And thank you again, Miss T, for joining the space. I definitely appreciate it. And it's so good to get to meet you in person. So, for the redemption party, I started the redemption party because running as an independent, as everybody knows, is difficult. And I did not really see any independent parties currently out there that aligned with my values and what I really wanted to attain with my presidential run. So I actually founded the Redemption Party and started a new party that's based in fiscal responsibility, limiting federal government to empower local government, and also constitutional sovereignty. I think those are three areas that need our focus today in the US. One of the biggest problems that I do see um, happening to the Black community is the target on our Black men. First and foremost, they want to use a Black man as poster child for single family or single parent homes. But why can't we have the conversation about teaching Black men to be better fathers or teaching them to be better husbands? We don't focus on teaching our Black men that they are amazing and they're always being torn down for the men that they are. And I really want to see that conversation change because as their helpmates, as us women, we need to help build our brothers up and not tear them down. And I'm tired of seeing Black men left behind. And that's one of the biggest problems that I really see. My stance on immigration, real quick, I want a moratorium on the border for a minimum of 10 years. Everybody that has applied for citizenship gives them time to get their citizenship. 10 years retroactively, along with any children being born here, no citizenship. You got to go back to square one. And if you want to come back to this country, you got to do it legally. You have to go through the legal channels, but your children will be stripped of their citizenship because of the illegal activity that brought them here. So I hope that answers your
I
question.
think you thoroughly answered my questions, and I
Okay.
believe that you definitely sound like a candidate I support. I could support, and I just want to throw out there that there has been a 10-year-old study. I think it's at least 10 years old, and there's a little blurb going around Twitter about the Black father and how that has been thoroughly debunked. That 72% of men basically are intimately involved with their children and more so than any other ethnic race. So I'm sure you'll be boning up on all those stats and such. And if you're here on these stages, we have a cornucopia of information and statistics to share with you. So, but welcome to the fight.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. The Prophet, and then the sister is next after him. So go ahead, Prophet.
Hey, appreciate that, brother Clarence. I appreciate the stage family, to Miss Nichols. Um, yeah, I was listening in. I just came back into the room because I was in another social media space. But thank you for being able to run. I would say I think Don already addressed my concern about the um, what's the word I'm trying to use, about the myth of the absentee black father and the myth of the absentee black man taking care of his family. That's been a myth. It's always been a myth. You know, when you have social policy going against black families, period, black American families, period, you know, there are people going to perpetuate those stereotypes against us. So I know that that was not your intention there, but that is a familiar talking point in the media today, you know, that wants to propagate those stories against our lineage and our history. So I would say that. Secondly, I would say to your point on the, I did see a story on TD Jakes with the banking issue. Um, I used to be a resident of Dallas, Texas. So a matter of fact, I used to live right around the corner from this church, so I'm very familiar with that area, South Dallas. And I do agree with you that probably not much will be given to the Black American community itself, especially in Texas. So I'm not sure, you know, where that program is going. And I would say on the issue of reparations, and I also would say to you as a political candidate, you know, that could be no compromise with that issue because Black Americans have suffered on these shores too long and too hard, and they still suffer in difficulties even into the contemporary day. And we should not yield back. And so if you're a candidate for president, I would say, unlike a lot of these modern day politicians I see, please have some courage, please have some convictions, please be able to propose and have convictions about your policies because that's going to win the day. Now, if you know, because I see a lot of politicians easily compromised, easily swayed by the winds of popular polls. So that's not the kind of politicians we need. We need to have politicians with convictions. So eagerly watching your campaign, and I'll yield back. Appreciate you, brother Clarence.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Hey, B.
Yes,
I
sir.
want let me get to this one question in the chat, but then next is
Silvis.
yeah. See, you skipped over about twice. I
Yeah,
noticed.
that was my fault. It was an accident. It
Yeah, no
moved
worries.
down
But
and then around, so that's my
let
fault.
me get to this chat question really quickly. My brother AMK. So, Miss Nichols, AMK says in the chat, he says he believes that we need a militarized presence at the Mexican border and at the Gulf shores. The question is, would you be opposed to enforcing the shores and the border by any means necessary?
I'm okay with the military presence. That's fine. Again, it's a deterrent, but it's not policy. The policy is what's wrong. The policy is what's broken because once a person crosses that threshold, it's what happens after the fact. If we're still allowing people to be housed, clothed, fed, even after they get through the barrier of a wall and military presence, will they stop? Or if we say, guess what? You can't come here. And if you get here and you don't have a job, we're not clothing and housing and feeding you. And to that, you're not going to work at a minimum wage job. You have to come here to be a part of the citizenship of this country. And that means having an education. That means you need to come with a degree, not just a high school degree, with a college diploma that you can get in your country because there are colleges in other countries. The last I checked, because people from here actually go overseas and go to school and come back with degrees. So you're not just going to come here. So I'm not opposed to a military presence to show strength, but it has to be the policy behind it that actually stands up that military force. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, I was speaking more towards that border is a national security threat.
Right.
I wasn't speaking towards immigration
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about how accessible the border in the Gulf Shores is. There's a lot of ghost people that's just roaming around the United States
Mm-hmm.
unchecked, and people get murdered and raped and everything
Mm-hmm.
else without being checked, without no records being on them at all.
Right. Right.
So when I say a militarized presence, I mean
Mm.
like force. Like
Okay.
if you cross the border, it could be real life consequences to where you might not even make it back to your homeland.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
and I know it sounds kind of harsh and abrasive, but
No.
that border and the golf course, it's a national security threat. It's not just about immigration. It's about
Hmm.
everything else. If
Right.
we
That
want to,
happened.
if you want to keep this country safe, that's our weakness. Is that border and the
Yeah.
golf course.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for
Thank you.
further explaining your question. And yeah, it is going to take that type of force also, right? I mean, I know I'm talking about policy and you're talking about like capturing people so that they cannot further destroy our population that's over here. Yes, so I definitely agree. There are countries, I want to say in the Middle East, that if people come to that border and they try to cross it, they pick them off. They have snipers that's their job all day long to shoot people to deter them from trying to cross over a border. So should we resort to that? I mean, will people be like, okay, we're not going to mess with America because they will shoot you if you try to get over here? We may have to resort to that because, to your point, there's too many people that have infiltrated our borders that have come over here that are raping and killing people. They're children, women, even men. And so there has to come a point where we're going to stand up and say, no more. You can't come here. And if the moratorium is put in place and you're still trying to come over here, oh yeah, we're going to have every right to shoot you. And people may go, oh my gosh, she's trying to be like a dictator. Nope, not trying to be like a dictator. Constitution says we have every right to use any type of force that we need to protect our borders. And if that means, unfortunately, shooting people who do not understand you can't just come over here like that, then that's what it's going to take. It's also going to take away, you know, taking away federal funding and stop incentivizing illegal activity. You're not going to be housed, you're not going to be clothed, you're not going to be fed if you come over here. That's over. You're not going to take that resource out of the hands of citizens that are here legally, that were born here, and that need that hand up so they can keep going, not to, make them dependent on the system, but to actually help them keep going and say, okay, we've helped you. It's time to get back to school. It's time to get to work. It's time to start your own business. We're here to assist you, but welfare is not going to be a lifestyle. It's going to be a hand up, not a handout. And that's going to be our retraining. But I'm definitely in agreement with military force if needed and necessary. It's got to happen.
Fantastic. Silvis, you're up next. I hope I'm saying your name right.
Well, thank you for taking me and hosting the space. And also for the candidate, or I hope the candidacy blessings and upliftment for your endeavors. I have a question, and the question is this: that um, looking at the enormity of the military budget, I saw on C-SPAN, I guess May of 2023, or perhaps this year, yeah, 2023, that they were discussing having instead of 400,000 for a Hellfire missile, they would have one that would be cheaper as such, and you know, to the discussion of such a thing, whereas it's such an overwhelming part of the budget. My question is this: what pathways, or would there be, or could there be pathways to one, um, look at that budget, whereas there's, what is it said in the Constitution, to ensure the domestic tranquility, to one, to do that, and at the same time, to, like, for example, the budget by comparison, the Department of Justice versus the Department of Defense. So, what, as a president, could be, or if there could be pathways to begin to, let's say, shrink that budget or use those expenditures. $15 billion for a boat. I mean, and the F-22s, they're wonderful. I was in Vermont, near Rutland, Vermont, and they sound wonderful. They're marvelous aircraft, but the entire expense of things that really will not help people as such. When domestically we have black farmers, but yeah. So how can
My
we?
dear brother. Yeah, what's their question, brother? What's their question?
Yeah, the question is, instead of having such a huge budget, and as president, how would you be able to find a pathway to maybe cause it to be half the budget what it is, and use it for Department of Energy, use it for Department of Agriculture, help black farmers, to take some of that money out to help us people that might need help. Thank you. Thank you for hearing me. I hope my question has been clear.
Yes, thank you, Civis, for your question. I know in a roundabout way you're looking at diverting funds from one area to another. And the Department of Defense has always been one of the larger budgets that we had to show military force and strength. However, it is also used as a slush fund in essence because it's one of the easier budgets to hide massive amounts of spending in, and nobody questions it because it falls under defense. So the assumption is we need this money in these areas to protect American lives and American citizens, even if the money isn't being spent and allocated that way. So it would actually be looking at okay, where is the money being spent that doesn't need to be. So obviously, there are some things I'm privy to that are on Google. There are some things that I'm not privy to. Um, but as the president, you get to have a broader set of eyes put on the information. And the president, yeah, can propose a budget, but at the end of the day, it's still voted upon by Congress. So you can make suggestions and say, okay, this is where I'd like the money to be spent or not spent. But at the end of the day, it can be vetoed, it cannot. We can have that whole argument and fight. But the budgets, yes, I do agree. There are areas where there can be reduced spending without it necessarily being broadcast to the rest of the world. I think that's one of the bigger problems that we have because people will say things, even if it's not true, to sway the country's vote one way or another. And the Department of Defense is always one of those questionable budgets that we have. And so it's just something that needs to be looked at and overhauled. And I know that probably doesn't answer your question because it is a matter of not just the president putting the budget together, but it's also an act of Congress to get the budgets put together. So it'd be something I could do what I could, but it would definitely take all meeting of the minds together. So sorry if that does not answer your question.
Yes. All right. New Negro Republic. You're up
Nope,
next.
nope, nope, no. Miss
Oh,
Edwards
sorry.
is next. Yeah.
My apologies. Okay, my fault. Thank you, Clarence.
Uh, Shout out to the host and the co-host. To
Hey, Miss Eddie, how you doing?
I'm good, Clarence. um,
Good to hear from
yeah,
you.
Miss Nichols family. So I have a two. Well, I have questions. I guess I should say. Question number one: Are you foundational on one side or both? That's the first part. And the second part is, how do you feel about the African immigrants that are here illegally? Will the same rules for your immigration policy be?
I don't hear the rest of your question.
I think the Wi-Fi may she may have been
No,
getting the
no, no.
Wi-Fi.
So I
Okay.
got a phone call. No, I was asking
Oh, sorry.
the African immigrant. Will your immigration policy be also for them? Will it be strengthened for illegal African immigrants that come here on a vacation visa or have babies and things of that nature, or the college, or whatever, however they get here? Because I know you've talked about those crossing the border, but I wanted to know about them, especially for your policy for immigration.
All right. Thank you, Miss Eddings, for your questions. So, when you say foundational on one side or both, I'm trying to understand that a little bit more. Would you mind clarifying?
So I am a foundational Black American. My both of my parents are from this continent, or is from the
Okay.
United States of America.
Oh,
I can trace them back,
gotcha.
to the
Okay.
1700s. So, like.
Okay. That's what I wanted clarity on. I was like, I want to make sure I answer this correctly. So, yes, I am a foundational Black American on both sides. My dad did the work to trace our family back 150 years to the plantation owner that owned our family. My maiden name is Wright. And so both of my parents were born here, their parents, and on down, like I said, back over 150 years. So I'm definitely a freedman descent, foundational Black American descent. Um, it will apply to any and all immigrants, whether they're from Africa, whether they're from Mexico, whether they're from Switzerland, from the Netherlands, from anywhere on the planet. If you came here illegally to the United States, you are going home. And if you had a child here illegally, they don't have citizenship. And this also includes, and we didn't even tap into this one, how women from Asian countries will come here and have their babies kind of like on a little bit of a vacation so their children can have dual citizenship. So they will come here, and I've seen these women, so this is not a conspiracy theory. I used to live in Irvine, California, and I did find a website where it basically would assist people of Asian descent to come and get an apartment and live there right before they had to deliver. And then they would have their child here, and then they would go back to those Asian countries. And then when their child turns 18, because their child has dual citizenship, that child can come back here and go to school and get a job, and then they can bring their family members back with them, which is a long game, but it's still a game. Things like that have to be shut down, and those individuals have to be denied citizenship because you did it illegally. You did not do it the right way. You had foul intentions, and all you've done is just abuse the law. And so those are the things that I want to stop with the immigration policies that we now have. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Clarence and B. Walker, and Miss Nichols, for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
New Negro Republic. You're up next, my friend.
Hey, thanks you guys for hosting the room. Shout out to Clarence for the invite, and shout out to 2024 Nichols. My question is, being the fact that between 1970 and now, we've been dealing with, I would say specifically the descendant community, Negro, freedmen, all those other terms, but we're still on people have been dealing with being positioned in minority, people of color, BIPOC, and those statuses have taken what you would say being 50 million, 46 of us, and putting us into competing with other people for, based on affirmative action minority policies, 10% of like federal budgets, contracting. What is your plan, if you have any, to make sure that there are it is some level of specificity towards the descendant community? There was a recent OMB situation where we were trying to make sure it's clear that we need our own term, our own title, our own designation. So when we apply, people can know that this is us and not black people getting something. And then when we really do the audit, it went to black immigrants or other people of color. Do you have any policy or any thoughts on how we could stop this economic sanctioning based on being positioned as a minority group when we truly aren't really a minority? And how would we be protected operating in the space for the other pool of 90% of federal contracting funds, grants, small business loans, and things of that nature, specifically as the descendant community for the goal of infrastructure development and being the true service providers for our own community?
Hello, thank you for your question. So, the short answer is I do want a delineation specifically for Black Americans, foundational Black Americans that were descended here. Because to your point, there are other individuals from other countries that piggyback off of the minority status. And then it's all muddled for, like, I know I keep going back to the Japanese internment camp example, but when they were, when they basically got their restitution, it was for Japanese Americans specifically. They weren't considered a minority and they got their restitution specifically. And so I'm definitely willing to craft something to put together. So I've drafted a reparations act, and that is definitely something that could be included in the act to ensure that it's written into law that Black Americans have that delineation and specificity that you're discussing and talking about so that it doesn't get muddled. Into your point, you're competing against or with other minorities for a small piece of the pie when our piece of the pie should be established in here based on lineage. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. The last part would be there needs to be an audit of the last 50 or so years of the abuse of the affirmative action policy. And I'm tired of hearing, oh, white women benefited from it, everybody benefited from it, and now we're looking at we own less than 0.5% for policies that our ancestors literally secured for us, and we have not been able to benefit from those within the last 50 years, from contracts, from specific earmarked dollars, sole sourcings, and things that I think even outside of reparations, we should get. We could look at the 70s to the 2000s and realize that we've been cut out of even any level of ownership, including like a grocery store. And I thank you for that.
Understood. Thank you.
I got a you got a question, B?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask.
Go
I
ahead.
know we've sort of on different topics here, but I just want to switch gears a little bit. I wanted to ask. I saw a recent Pew Research poll, which I consider to be the gold standard of polling, said that 64% of Americans believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Recently, Governor H. Hutchinson of Arkansas signed a no exception rule. Period. Abortion restriction. Ron DeSantis in Florida signed a 6-week heartbeat ban bill. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the legality of abortion and should it be constrained or restrained at the federal level?
Thank you for your question. Um, I do not want an abortion bill at the federal level. And that the main reason why is because you could have somebody unscrupulous use it in a wrong way to where they could actually force something on an individual without their consent. So I'm glad that it was disseminated to the states. But here's the other side of that. We also have to classify what's an abortion and what isn't. because unfortunately there have been people, and I think recently there was a woman, I'm not sure if she miscarried or not, but her situation wasn't treated as a miscarriage, and I'm just assuming that it was treated like, okay, if I go forward as a doctor and help you, it could be misconstrued as an abortion, as opposed to your body unfortunately rejecting the fetus, and your fetus is dying inside of you. There is a distinction. We have doctors in place that can assist with this, but if the law isn't clear within a state that says, hey, this is an ectopic pregnancy or this is a miscarriage and you need to perform a D&C so this woman will not die or bleed to death or lose her life because it may be construed as an abortion. That's where it comes into the letter of the law, and these states really need to wake up and pay attention to what they're doing, because it can be done in such a way that it starts disproportionately killing people, maybe based on the color of their skin, maybe based on their economic status. And so this was done, but it wasn't really done thoughtfully. And the people that are making the decisions aren't doctors, they're policymakers. And you need to have people in the room that actually perform procedures to say, okay, can we get a classification of what this is, and then get this put into the American Medical Journal, and then disseminate ICD-9 codes so that it covers these specific topics when it comes to a woman. So if somebody's having an ectopic pregnancy, that's not going to be viewed as an abortion if they have to, have a fetus removed from their body. I hope that answers the question, because I know it is definitely a sticky situation. I've personally had an abortion and it was very devastating for me to go through that mentally and emotionally. We don't think about the whole person. We just kind of say, oh, this happens, but there's a lot more mentally involved in it. And I think we have to be a lot more thoughtful, and the governors do, even at the state level, before they just start making decisions on people's bodies. But I definitely don't want it at the federal level. I do want it at the state level.
If I could just ask a quick follow
Sure.
up. If you leave it to the states, right? So there's 50 states, obviously. Um, Asa Hutchinson just passed the law where it said where he doesn't have any exceptions. So if a woman needs to have an abortion, even if it is a threat of her life, she has to go out of that state. I guess my question is, without any sort of federal sort of guidelines that states have to follow,
Mm-hmm.
are you leaving the health care of women in this country to the governor Asa Hutchinson of the world, who's about 80 years old?
Again, like I said, at the federal level, if you were to institute anything, you could still go back to, you know, the First Amendment, where we do have the right to our person. But medically, it would be a very slippery slope, like I said, to put something in place at the federal level, because, like I said, somebody could come by behind that and say, oh, okay, well, we have the right to tell you what you can put in your body or not put in your body. We can tell you what you can eat and cannot eat. So I don't want it to be a slippery slope. But medically, they should be looking to medical doctors. If there was a way for us to craft a law that say, okay, states, you have to, fall upon this at the federal level, because each state can exercise the Constitution the way they see fit. And that's how we've gotten here. But we've gotten here to the point where we're willing to let people die in cases where they shouldn't be dying. And so it still goes back to, okay, state, you're like, okay, no exceptions abortion. Okay, well, an ectopic pregnancy isn't an abortion. The procedures are totally different. So you can't call an ectopic pregnancy an abortion. You have to have the doctors understand what it is and what it isn't. So I know it's a rounded conversation. It takes a lot more forethought, but it takes more medical individuals being in the room than just policymakers making policy based on their feelings. So I hope that helps.
So the as far as like would you believe life begins at a certain amount of weeks or anything like that, you as president went and tried to implement a ban on the federal level at a certain level.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have an aunt, she was born less than 2 pounds. And the doctors told my grandmother, don't get too attached to her. Well, she's still alive. She got married. She's had 2 kids. She's got 3 grandchildren. She's had a full life. With the laws that we have in place now, they would have put in place comfort care, and she may not have made it out of the incubator.
I mean, sure, there are
So,
oftentimes one-off examples that you can give. I mean, there was a woman,
yeah.
in South Carolina who her she was having a miscarriage, and apparently, when you have a miscarriage and the baby is more than about 10 weeks, it unfortunately inside the woman the baby is dying, the fetus is
Mm-hmm.
dying, and it was
Right.
causing her to have infections, and they sent her home because the law is so onerous in South Carolina that they were not able to pull the baby out of her because that would be considered an abortion.
Abortion. Right.
Um, I'm just curious that I don't for it would seem that your policy is that if a woman happens to live in a state that is more progressive on abortion, then she's in good shape. But if a woman happens to live in a state in which there are draconian healthcare restrictions on women, then they are then left to their own devices. And I mean, as you, I'm sure, are very well aware of, Black women in this country receive a less adequate healthcare at all levels. Even Serena Williams had to be very aggressive when it came to a problem that she was having with her child when she was born. Um, I just, if we're going to, you know, say like, well, the government can't tell us what to do. Well, the government does tell us what to do. There's a reason that you can't just build a building anywhere you want to. You can't just use any drug you want to. It has to be, done by the FDA. So
Right. Like I
I
was
just,
saying, what I would want is I would want more authorities given to the doctors in those senses in those draconian states and it to be spelled out. Because again, each state exercises the Constitution, even under the federal level. They're not supposed to give people any less than the law, they can give them more. Like I said, it's just a very slippery slope when you're talking about putting it at the federal
Well,
level. I don't want people to lose their lives over an ectopic
so
pregnancy because they
let me say
shouldn't.
this. So here's the thing about that, and B, you beat me to it. I was going to ask that same question, so we were thinking the same, right? Um, Again, states have rights, and when the Supreme Court kicked it back down to the states, every state is going to decide what the question of abortion looks like for them. So the federal
Yeah,
government does not have the purview to set a standard of what abortion looks like. If that's the case, Roe v. Wade would still
right,
be intact, but individual states. So if your state says abortion is this, that's what it is. If your other state says this, that's what it is. But here's how I think it's going to shake out. Like personally, I don't agree with the total ban on abortion. I don't agree with that. I agree with maybe 6 to 10 week guideline there. I think that's healthy. And then for me personally, then you have your exceptions: rape, incest, saving the life of the mother, saving the
right,
child, all that kind of stuff, blah 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 blah. Those type
right,
of things, right? I'm not a banned person, but what's going to happen is
right,
as every state shapes what they want their abortion question to look like, it's going to go to the Supreme Courts, and then it's going to be challenged
yeah,
at the state level, and it's going to eventually go to the federal Supreme Court, and then they're going to decide what that standard is across the country. And so the president cannot just say, hey, this is what abortion should look like. The federal Supreme Court is going to decide what is legal, what is constitutional, and then that will be the standard across the board. And I think that's when every state will be kind of uniform in that way. But the federal government cannot, president cannot, Congress cannot mandate what that looks like. It's all solely left up to the states. And so that's why Supreme
yeah,
Courts are very important. Let me ask this. Oh, I see OG. OG, I'm gonna get your question in, and I got one more question. Then I gotta go eat dinner. I'm starving right now. To be frank with y'all.
Yeah, appreciate it. Shout out, Brother Clarence, and the co-host. Shout out to the room. Peace, prosperity to all in the room. Listen, I'm just coming up on this, and I felt compelled to say something because I have a medical background. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a judge. Any of that thing. But listen, if this thing wasn't a problem of the feelings, these states, these Supreme Court judges, they don't go in there judging on knowledge and scholarship. They go in there on their feelings, but they can hide it. It's easy to hide because all they got to do is say, well, Constitution section 1A, okay, so they can just say all of these things and sound some kind of profound. But if they were any kind of profound, they would let the damn doctors hash out all of this abortion, all this ectopic pregnancy and all. And if these doctors can't do that shit, then they're not the experts that they're supposed to be. It's just simple as that. It shouldn't have to even be no debate about when life begins. Obviously life begins at conception. That's obvious. I mean, any clinician that can't argue that out and articulate it, they probably don't even need to be a clinician. And the other side that says, well, it's just a glob of mass. Yeah, that's a glob of bullshit. As
Well,
simple as that.
I feel your passion, brother. But what's your question for the candidate?
Well, my question is how are you going to get the doctors to speak up for their expertise versus judges that know nothing? How are you going to empower doctors and clinicians to exercise their knowledge overall, empirically? How are you going to get them to do that over the judges? Why do they Supreme Court even have to come into place on this? They know nothing. I land on that. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Oh no. Ah! Oh no. Okay.
But by the way, congratulations on your candidacy. Also, I meant to, you know.
Miss Nichols, are you there? Did we lose you? Okay, I think we
She
may
having
have.
some Wi. She having some Wi-Fi problems, Clarence.
Yeah, she might have Android too. Yeah,
You and this
she.
pro Apple stance.
Hey man. Hey man.
I
Yeah, I
think I got a
think.
better chance of getting you to vote for Joe Biden than I do switching to an Android. Jeez.
Woo, bro, you pushing it on both ends.
Yeah, I
Pushing
know.
it. Yeah. Let's get her back up. Now I want to get
She drop
I
out.
want to get Black Majority's question. Then I got to bounce after Black Majority's question.
Okay,
Because
so
this
I won't bring anybody else up there.
yeah, this
Um,
fried chicken is getting cold over here. That my lovely wife has made tonight. Um, but really appreciate everybody being in the room for this conversation. Hope you have enjoyed the responses, the thoughtful responses, the thoughtful questions from folks in the audience. I hope you have appreciated B. Walker and his grilling of the candidate on every question.
brother, don't do
Uh,
that. Brother, don't do that. I was just asking a question.
no, I'm just messing with you.
Nah, I know. But you're right. I was.
No, it's all good. It's all good. What? Okay, yeah, she's coming back. Bring the
Okay,
sister
so
back up for me, B.
yes, sir. Sister Nichols, come on down.
And candidates should be grilled because your vote is priceless. And anybody that's not fighting for your vote, they don't deserve it. both parties assume, well, they don't have any choices. They're going to have to vote one way or the other. You know what? This next election, it's time to let them know, no, we do have a choice and we don't have to vote for you. And we can put people in office that care about what we want to do. And we're going to put them there. And we're going to make a stance because trust me, there are more of us than there are of the politicians. They just want us to think that there aren't.
So, so let me say this real quick, and then you can get to Brother OG's question,
Okay.
and then get to Black Majority, and then we'll wrap it up. But no, see, my interview style is different from B Walker. I'm not gonna grill you. I'm just gonna ask you the question because I don't want to take a position, and I just want to allow you to do your thing, and I just want to educate people, right? So I don't want to sway the conversation either way. I may vehemently disagree with you. You won't know it. I just want to give you the opportunity to share your thoughts. That's how I interview. Now, unless I got something out for you, I ain't gonna really grill you like that. I'm just gonna let you, and your answer is whatever your answer is. I'm gonna allow the people that heard it to make their decision based on the information. That's my style. B. Walker, on the other hand,
I'm from the Tim
what?
Russert School of Journalism.
Yeah, he wants to be Roland Martin over here. You know.
It's okay.
Not rolling, but Tim Russert.
I know that's a low comparison. I apologize, brother. Uh, but go ahead,
Well,
Sister Nichols.
let's get an answer. Then we get Black Majority after that.
Right.
Okay, so OG, thank you for your question. And we do need to empower doctors to be doctors and not politicians and not bureaucrats and not operatives within their practice because they go to school for a long time to do something that they love and that we appreciate because there are people here on this line, me included, we've had a doctor maybe in our lives that have helped save our lives and make our lives better. So the abortion topic, it is definitely it's sticky. Because like I said, I don't want a policy written that can control other people's bodies, but we do need to put policy in place to make sure that doctors can make the better choices than what politicians make. So I know that may not have answered your question, but that's the goal.
Black Majority, you on the mic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clarence and Mr. V. Walker, and of course the candidate, Ms. Nichols. So the first thing I want to do is thank you for being an inspiration, Black American who is running for the highest office in the country. I know that we have a few candidates that are vying for this office, so salute to everyone who does run for office in this country as a Black American. It's extremely important. I have lost faith in the federal government because I have a different political agenda. But I want to ask a request and then a very quick question. The request is that as a presidential candidate, as you develop your platform and develop your policies, that in the back of your mind you think of ways, no matter what it is, defense, healthcare, etc., border patrol, in contracting and developing Black American businesses to facilitate those functions at the federal level, because that will create significant change across the entire country wherever we are. I think that's the one thing that the federal government can do because they have offices in every state and they are able to hire our people across the entire country. And the Black American population that is centered around the DC DMV area has a higher level of income because many of them either work on or contracted with the federal government. So then my question is this: as a presidential candidate, if you make it to the highest office, understanding, I love the fact that we talked about states' rights and we sort of created this understanding that there is a difference between states and the federal government. Will you, as either an executive order or by working with Congress, establish a reverse migration initiative whereby you will fund and help to fund those of us who can't afford to move, but who want to move, from the federal level, because that is one of the biggest hesitant arguments that I get is can't afford to do it. Can't afford to do it. Even though since 2000, nearly 8 million of us have actually moved to the South already. So we are doing it. We are moving. The reverse migration is happening, but we certainly could use assistance from the federal level. And thank you again for running and answering the question.
Hey, Black Majority, thank you for being in the space, and thank you for your request and also for your question, and always, responding to some of my tweets and retweeting what I put out. I definitely appreciate it. So, with that, when you're talking about establishing the reverse migration initiative, I definitely think that is something that can be included in the Reparations Act. And it's also something that could be put into an executive order, because what it could be looked at is, how should I say it? How we give grants for different programs. It would have to be crafted as a program that those that wanted to migrate to certain areas of the country that couldn't necessarily afford it. And this is also to the question that somebody asked earlier, of the initiative about housing and building that generational wealth. Put a program in place. Now, this would obviously take a little bit more work than just me. I would actually have to have somebody draft it, but it could be drafted by executive order to get the money in place. And I'm not talking about doing a loan. I don't want it to be something that has to be paid back, but it actually be a grant to be able to build up locations, to your point, where people, if they wanted to migrate to a certain area that is underpopulated with freedmen, Black Americans, foundational Americans that want to move to that area. Say if somebody's living, I don't know, in California or maybe Seattle or Portland, Oregon, and they want to move to South Carolina, but they don't have the funds, they could apply for the grant. And we could say, okay, based on your income, based on the fact that you could actually, work here and have this job and then afford this house that we can get you into, that could definitely be a program in place to assist with that. So I'm definitely not against that. I'm for that, definitely. And I will yield back the microphone.
Yep. Thank you for your answers, and thank you everybody for being here. This has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you for making time to share your vision for America. Thank you for answering B. Walker's tough questions as well, and taking all the questions from everybody. But any last words? 1 minute, any last thoughts you want to share with folks
Okay.
about your campaign?
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for taking out the time this evening to be in the space. Please visit my website, www.nichols4president.com. And that's Nichols, FORpresident.com. I can use any and all donations. $1 is more than enough. And I know people will be like, huh? Trust me, if I had 1 million people giving $1, it'd be $1 million. So it's just simple math. Also, I'm a member of the Redemption Party, and we are taking on candidates at the local, state, and federal level. And you can visit the website. It's www.redemption-party.com. And we need as many people to join the party as we can to really start a movement that's not going to stop. People need to start respecting the vote, and they need to stop expecting the vote. So, with that, I'll yield back because I know people want to get to their lives and their families. But again, I thank everybody so much for taking your time out to be in this space this evening.
Yep. Any last words, B. Walker?
No, I just want to thank everybody. I wish your sister a lot of luck. I can't wait to see you on that debate stage. And I will definitely be ordering your book. Look for it here on Amazon. And I just appreciate that you putting yourself out there, because it is in no part a small thing to put yourself in the lives of people you love in the public eye. It is something that keeps a lot of good people out of politics. So I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate you making the time for us.
Yeah, and right now there are two other people that are saying that they're running for president in my inbox right now, asking to have a similar conversation. So if you're not following me and B Walker, make sure you follow us, so you can catch the next conversation. This is weird. So let's keep these conversations going, because I want to put the information out there unbiased, so you guys can ask your questions, so you can know who's on the ballot, so you can make informed decisions. I wish I could get Joe Biden in here, but I know that won't happen. But really
I'll
appreciate
make a
everybody.
call.
Yeah, please do. And
Oh wow. Um, the space ended very abruptly, but the space has ended. Guys, hopefully you was able to get a chance to listen to candidate Ash- Shakia Nichols, 52-year-old black woman. She is running for the presidential candidate for 2024. I'm not sure, and I didn't get a chance to ask any of the questions. I'm not sure. I don't think she's a Democrat or Republican. I think she was more of an independent. I'm not really sure. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm not 100% sure kind of what was her vibe there, but I really enjoyed listening to that. I like listening to people that were able to ask questions about immigration. Like that was really important. Like, so again, I put this up here because I want to know how the black family feel about immigration. One of the things is I feel like too, um, put a hold on immigration, meaning anyone from entering the United States border for at least 10 years. Also stop birthright citizenship. Um, a lot of people may feel like this is a radical idea, but being the stakeholders in America as a Black American and being a stakeholder in America, we need to set some boundaries going on because life is not how it used to be 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And the best way that I can explain this is that we have to learn from our mistakes. Okay. America is only so big. And I would behoove to say that everybody else's continent and where they live at is much more bigger. Mexico is huge. Okay, Mexico is huge. We, as a United States citizen, as a foundational Black American, a lineage based American, Black American, we need to put a hold on immigration right now. Okay, all walks of life. Every immigration, we need to put at least a 10-year hold on that so we can do a reset. You know how like sometimes I walk around the home and I'm looking at things like, okay, let's pause on spending and let's put some money over here because the roof is going bad. We need some new windows. We need to do some little upgrading and up and gatekeeping. So I think immigration for me, and this is just my personal opinion, I like that she actually said that, is that she is definitely willing to do at least a 10-year hold on immigration and also citizen birthright. If you guys are not familiar with citizen birthright, that means if you are an illegal alien, you came here illegally. You didn't come here through the right process. You came through illegally. You're crossing the borders illegally. And then when you cross these borders illegally, you start getting resources dedicated to you: housing, food, job, and training. Meanwhile, Black people specifically aren't getting any of those type of benefits. We're getting pushed further and further back. It's not
xenophobia. It is called understanding our condition. And if you have children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, I would assume, this is me, I would assume that you would want your grandchild to have the same benefits that you was afforded at one point in time. But now those, because all the money can't just be distributed equally because it's not. That's the problem. It's not. And even if it, in my opinion, if I was born here and I've been here hundreds of years, I should get first dibs on that. Not the new immigrants that's coming in. No, I should get first dibs on that. If I go to another country, I wouldn't expect to get first dibs on housing, first dibs on jobs, first dibs on any type of program that can help benefit me. And for some reason, Black Americans, and I'm specifically talking about Black Americans, have lost this understanding of how this works because we're getting pushed further and further and further and further back where we're no longer even going to be existing. Okay. So, anyway, I love that. I also love that she talked about lineage based reparations and also putting in place. She talked about something called a judgment fund, or I gotta look this up. This was a great something I never heard of before because we're looking for cash payments, reparations for lineage based Black Americans who can trace their lineage back, at least, in my opinion, 1860, 1870 census. If you have at least one parent, because we do have a lot of mixed, family members, but if you have at least one parent, one grandparent, one side of your family that you can do a genealogy trace back, meaning the census, marriage records, death records. Okay, it's not hard. Back to the 1860, 70 census. And you also have to be claiming Black, I would say long term, but within the last 10 years of this said proposal or bill. Okay, so you can't just be like, oh, hey, I'm Black, but you've been white your whole life. No, that's not going to work. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about with the reparations there, but I think it was a very good topic and very good conversation. She was very pleasant. She answered all of the questions just very open and honestly, in my opinion. Because a lot of times people come on, they're very hostile. We have interviewed candidates, whether it's not she's going to candidate for presidency, but this candidate's just for the local senate or mayoral, mayoral, how you want to say that, or city council people who come up a little hostile for whatever reason, because I'm sure they have a reason. But she was very welcoming with the questions and she wanted to hear the questions. And I really appreciated that because a lot of times you get people who are really not interested in asking the questions and even saying, well, hey, I don't know about that. Let me write this down and I'm going to get back to you and see, if I can come and answer that question. I really like that a lot because that's human nature. You know what I mean? If you got a question for everything, then I'll question that too. Okay, but guys, thank you so much for joining me. If you don't know, I am Chanel Sussex here on Black Media Voice, where we get to hear the Black voices, what's happening in our community, whether it's politics, education, entertainment, labor law, health, politics, religion, sex, technology, and war, all 11 areas of people activity. And it's so important to make sure that we are abreast on what's happening. And my goal and hope is to bring that information to you this so you'll know what's going on. You do not have to participate, but at least you know. So you're gonna say, "Well, I don't know." Okay, so I can't consider myself a new Black media because no one knows me, but I am Black Media Voice, and I'm just bringing to you what I see and what's in my cipher. So it is late, and so I guys. Tune to me on Friday. Friday is going to be so much fun for Cocktail Happy Hour. And I'm going to have some other stuff for Midday Morning News Rundown. So I am excited to just bring some more information to you. So until then, guys, be safe, be well, get up in the morning and be productive. And I'll see you soon.